Today we're going to talk about spring football for the Ohio State University, and all that's coming up after the bumper.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to my son's YouTube channel?
Mama, no!
Just snap the damn ball, RJ.
What's up, kid folk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day at 6 p.m. Central Time. It's always OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good time, and today we're going to talk extensively about Ryan Day's Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, why? Well, because I'm interested, man. Yeah, OU is where it's at, but I'm also terribly fond of this whole thing called college football. And I'm especially fond of the storylines and the people that make those things up. Ryan Day and Ohio State Buckeyes are massively interesting to me because we're already beginning to talk about Ryan Day in the way that folks were talking about Lincoln Riley when he ascended to the head man job at the University of Oklahoma. In the same way that folks talked about perhaps Mark Helfrich. And you can go either way on that. You could maybe fall off a cliff if you're Mark Helfrich, or continue to recruit and compete and be great like Lincoln Riley. And that's really the question for Ryan Day. And it was from the moment that he was given the job. Now, Ohio State Buckeye fans will know that its defense wasn't that much better than Oklahoma's defense under Greg Schiano. As a matter of fact, there were some Ohio State fans that were throwing some shade at Alex Grinch being the defensive coordinator hire at Oklahoma as he was co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State. We all know he wasn't calling the plays. We all know that it was banter. We all know this fan-to-fan interaction. But I do think that Greg Schiano wasn't doing a great job. And if you look at the numbers, you could see that he wasn't doing a great job either. Under Schiano, they were giving up an average of 400 yards per game. They were also giving up nearly 160 rushing yards per game. They were 71st in total defense and giving up about 26 points per game in the Big Ten. I don't really think that's what y'all do in the Big Ten score, so giving up 26 points is not like giving up 26 points in the Big 12. That's like an average day. See what I did there? Day to day. Bad joke. Won't make that one again. But you get my point here. They made a change. He made a change. Ryan Day did, bringing in co-defensive coordinators Greg Mattison and Jeff Hafley. Now, I think Greg Mattison's going to end up calling the plays for them. And why not? The guy's coming over from Michigan. I'm not sure how that's going to sit with Ohio State fans. I know how it's going to sit with Michigan fans. And he was coaching defensive line there. And he was a hire from the Brady Hoke era at Michigan. Comes to Ohio State ostensibly to run the defense and perhaps coach the linebackers because, well, they kind of got their own version of a line coaching legend in Larry Johnson up there. The way that OU fans talk about Oklahoma's offensive line coach, Bill Bedenbaugh, is the way that Ohio State Buckeye fans talk about Larry. And I'm going to be making some comparisons between Ohio State and Oklahoma, not just because I believe that there are a lot of comparisons there, especially going into the 2019 season, but so that I can get both of the conversations and both the communities talking about it in a way that they both understand. And what I'm telling you about Larry Johnson is that you're looking at a guy that just put Nick Bosa, draft, Joey Bosa, draft, Draymond Jones, draft, Chase Young, who is going to probably be the most dominant pass rusher in the game next year, going to go in the first round of the NFL draft. I think the one position that none of us are overly terrified about if we're talking about Ohio State, but also the one where I think they're going to be the most experienced and be the strongest defensively is linebacker. You got the firm of Malik Harrison, Tuf Borland, and Baron Browning as I think going to be your starting linebacking core. Tuf Borland has been talked about as a guy who can make the leap into the first round if he has an outstanding 2019. But Malik Harrison seems to be the only guy that you could depend on to be a starter, if for no other reason than he looks the part and he plays the part. And with Al Washington coaching the linebackers, I think Greg Mattison's going to have his hands all over the place, particularly with the linebacking core. And the depth you have returning there, I don't see why that can't be an absolute strength of what you're doing. It's not going to be what you're doing on a defensive line, though, if you're Ohio State. And if anybody was going to be able to keep their job, it was going to be Larry Johnson. But you know who else was going to be able to keep their job? Brian Hartline. Now, a lot of folks remember Brian Hartline as a wide receiver at Ohio State. And when the Zach Smith controversy went down, I was all over that as well. Brian Hartline did a job quietly, did an awesome job with so much turmoil swirling around them. Now, I know that the wide receivers at Ohio State are not unlike the wide receivers at Oklahoma, at Alabama, at Clemson. You're just going to be good at that position. But also what he was able to do with guys like Paris Campbell, and then what he was able to do in bringing in guys like Garrett Wilson, who could be their spring game MVP if things go correctly. That's a huge get. That's a 5-star wide receiver a lot of folks want, including Oklahoma and Texas. Garrett Wilson could be the next great wide receiver for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And Brian Hartline's already doing a pretty great job in recruiting. I think that was an outstanding move to make him the receivers coach at Ohio State. And I've spent all this time talking about wide receivers without mentioning KJ Hill in the slot, Chris Olave, and of course, Benjamin Victor and Austin Mack. You're going to have wide receivers, and that's kind of going to be the issue going forward for Ohio State, I think, because with J.K. Dobbins back there, it's probably your primary feature back. You have all of these wide receivers who are capable of making plays on short, little slants and drag routes, particularly KJ Hill, Paris Campbell last year. It's going to be interesting to see how Ryan Day deploys this offense to try to, again, make a problem not a problem, which is having a lot of talent at wide receiver and not being able to spread the ball out as much as you want to, like Oklahoma will have in 2019. I think the guy to lead the receivers here is going to be KJ Hill, if for no other reason than what he did last year. But Benjamin Victor flashed for me a lot last year, and I like Chris Olave. And again, I've expressed how much I like Garrett Wilson and how I think he can be an immediate contributor for Ohio State. But you also got a great luxury, and you can move Kevin Wilson to coaching tight ends. Now, Kevin Wilson made his name as the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. Was a head coach in Indiana for a while. Came over to be a co-offensive coordinator with Day at Ohio State. And you can move him to tight ends now and bring in Oklahoma State's offensive coordinator to be your passing game guy and co-offensive coordinator, and Mike Yurcich. And Mike Yurcich, all he did was come from Shippensburg State, go to Oklahoma State, learn the offense, get really good with Mason Rudolph, and then take what I think is a better job at Ohio State. Ryan Day doing the most for that staff. And then Jeff Hafley, great NFL experience to go into a secondary that was essentially left by Alex Grinch, and you get to redefine what you guys are going to do and how you're going to do it, especially with this bullet position. I'm very interested to see how that's deployed because it feels like Brendan White's going to play that job, but it's a hybrid linebacker safety role, which I would love to see rolled out at Oklahoma. Sort of like a nickel, but not really. You see a lot of that kind of position in Alabama where you just have those sorts of athletes. But the reason I'm bringing up Brendan White here is because Oklahoma folks will be really positive about Josh Proctor getting a shot to be a starting safety. And this was the #1 recruit in the 2018 class out of the state of Oklahoma at Owasso High School. We all liked Josh Proctor, thought he should have stayed in state or should have been recruited harder to stay in state. He did what was best for him, and now it feels like in 2019 he's really going to get an opportunity to shine because that dude has all the natural ball hawking center field skills that you want to make the secondary the kind that can keep the lid on and let those outstanding cornerbacks do the work. And again, this is a university that has put defensive backs into the league on a regular basis, and that can't be understated. Now, also, Ohio State fans will be slightly ticked to know that Greg Schiano once hired Jeff Hafley to be his secondary coach at Rutgers in 2011. I kind of think there was something to that because you know who you know and the business is so small, but I don't think it is the really terrible hire that a lot of folks seem to think that it is. I think Jeff Hafley could do a really good job. And again, the thing to emphasize about Hafley is he does an outstanding job developing players into the kind that end up in the NFL, and that is what you want at Ohio State. You're going to get talent coming through the door. You need to develop it into first, second round NFL draft picks to keep that talent rolling through the door. Speaking of talent rolling through the door, Justin Fields is an Ohio State Buckeye, going to be able to play right away, but I'm really interested to see how Matthew Baldwin is handling all of this because I've always thought that it is very, very indicative of the quarterback room to see how the guy who's probably not going to end up winning the job is reacting to probably not winning the job again, because it's usually not the freshman that you're talking about. Matthew Baldwin is an elder statesman in that quarterback room. As a matter of fact, he's pointed to as the guy who has to teach the offense to dudes like Dwayne Haskins, to dudes like Tate Martell when he was there. And all of this is very, very interesting. Matthew Baldwin is a guy coming out of Lake Travis in Texas. You'll know that Baker Mayfield came out of Lake Travis in Texas. He has the ability to be a starting quarterback. He's just not a 5-star recruit. 5-star recruits come through the door on a regular basis out there, and he's standing up to the task, and I think that that's a really big deal. I don't think that should be understated either. I also think if you are going to push Matthew Baldwin as the guy who should start for the Ohio State Buckeyes in 2019, you have a lot of ammo at your disposal. Number one is the man is outlasted, if you want to look at it that way. Dwayne Haskins, who chose to go to the NFL, is probably going to be a first-round draft pick. He also saw Joe Burrow transfer out, and he also saw Tate Martell transfer out. He also has the most experience with Ryan Day's playbook, for which Tate Martell was like, look, when I first got here, Dwayne Haskins said, it's going to take a while to learn Ryan Day's playbook. I don't even all have it down, and I'm probably going to end up starting at quarterback. And even Matthew Baldwin, when he's talking to Ryan Day and saying what it was like to learn his playbook when Ryan Day was first installed as the play caller, said, look, it's going to be a lot like learning Chinese. You're not going to know that you're any good at it until you get on the field and you see how it works and why it works. Again, Justin Fields is having to learn all of this stuff on the fly. We know that he's the more talented guy from a tool standpoint. There are things that Justin Fields can do that Matthew Baldwin just can't do. At Oklahoma, you saw this with Kyler Murray and Austin Kendall. At Alabama, you saw this with Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts. At Clemson, you saw this with Trevor Lawrence and Kelly Bryant. This is not unheard of. But again, Matthew Baldwin comes from a winning pedigree and is a Texas high school football quarterback. Those guys are usually pretty good. He's also got a good head on his shoulder saying, look, I am the guy in the room who's probably going to be drawing up what we're doing when we're asked as a group, hey, how much of this do you retain? And I think that's also really, really important. But more than that, I think the ammo you have at your disposal is Matthew Baldwin is much more fitted to running the kind of scheme that Ryan Day ran with Dwayne Haskins last year. It's not necessarily the basketball on grass that it was with Urban Meyer. It was, all right, I guess we're going to drop back and throw the ball 40 times a game as opposed to try to run it and spread people out with the run, because spread is a loose term that you can put nearly every kind of football scheme underneath. But you get the point. Ryan Day, he'll throw the ball. Whether or not Matthew Baldwin will be his quarterback, I think is going to be contingent on how well Justin Fields throws the ball through the 15 spring practices and into the 3 weeks of preseason camp. Feels like Jeffrey Okudah, Damon Arnett, and Sean Wade are going to continue to do that 3-man rotation at nickel, corner, and corner. We'll see who is able to break in there, but I expect Jeff Hafley is going to be able to earn his money here, developing those guys into the kind of NFL stars, really, that you've seen come out of Ohio State at the cornerback position. Excuse me, I'm fumbling words now. Still, your problem is going to be replacing Kendall Sheffield, and I know that that's not a name that a lot of people outside Ohio State know or remember, but he was a big deal to what you were doing last year in a secondary that got torched on a regular basis, though. I know at running back, most folks like DeMario McCall and Master Teague as the guys who are going to be battling for that number 2 spot behind J.K. Dobbins. I like Master Teague a little bit more, but I'm going to tell you, I don't like him as much as I like Marcus Crowley, and I want to take a moment to just highlight what I like about that dude. I understand that there are folks that aren't necessarily enthusiastic about that guy because he's not the highly regarded, highly touted running back recruit you used to land at Ohio State. Oklahoma kind of sort of had that problem, but not really. Usually get who you want, and I think Marcus Crowley's a guy that you want. When you watch his tape coming out of Trinity Christian Jacksonville, he reminds me a lot of Steve Slayton. You know, he's a 6'1", 200-pound back. He's sleek. He can move. He can cut. But more than anything else, he covers a lot of ground with what doesn't seem to be like a really, really short stride. He just kind of picks him up, puts him down, but covers a lot of ground in the way that you kind of would see him in that sort of H-back role that used to be apparent in Urban Meyer's offense when you had like a Percy Harvin or even maybe like a Paris Campbell. He just feels like the kind of guy that can do a lot catching the ball as well as be your spellback. And I think I'm mentioning him because we know that Mike Weber declared for the NFL draft and J.K. Dobbins is going to need somebody to share the load with, and Marcus Crowley seems like the most natural fit. It's an early enrollee, and we'll see what that means for him down the line. But you obviously are going to have somebody back there with J.K. Dobbins as the feature back where you want to run 2 running back sets or you just want to get J.K. Dobbins a breather. Another guy to mention here that I think is kind of flying under the radar, especially for folks that aren't really watching the program as closely as, say, I am or others, C.J. Saunders. I understand that this is not the kind of guy that everybody would point to, but that guy's going to be the next 5-star breakout wide receiver. I already mentioned Garrett Wilson's going to be that dude, but C.J. Saunders can certainly end up in the rotation and get a lot of playing time, probably be pretty good as a go route guy because he's a capable punt returner. I also just don't necessarily see anybody competing with Garrett Wilson once he gets on the field. I believe in that kid that much. I think he really does have the goods, and I think if there's a chemistry created between him and Matthew Baldwin or Justin Fields, it's going to also point to who's going to be your starting quarterback in the fall. At defensive tackle, feels like Teron Vincent and Robert Landers are going to be your guys at the nose in the 3 technique. Again, Larry Johnson is probably going to do a job putting this line together and getting the kind of pressure that you're used to getting from an Ohio State front line. But there's one guy that you should be keeping your eye on outside of Chase Young and Jonathan Cooper. It's Tyreke Smith, because I understand, again, Chase Young, he's going to be the guy everybody's talking about. When you hear Joel Klatt talking on the Fox Sports broadcast, he's probably going to say Chase Young's not young. When you hear Joel Klatt talking on the Fox Sports broadcast, he's probably going to say Chase Young's name 9,700 times. When you hear anything else, you're probably going to hear about Jonathan Cooper. But Tyreke Smith has an opportunity to make his name on a defensive line that has done nothing but put first-round talent into the league. Guys that grade out as could be immediate starters in the NFL. Now, he had a few opportunities as a sophomore. I expect him to have more in this next season, and I'm sure that Larry Johnson is working up a score, and I'm sure that Larry Johnson is going to find ways to get that guy in positions to succeed. Just as I'm sure that Mike Yurcich is going to have a ball figuring out with Ryan Day who the signal caller is going to be at Ohio State. If you like the videos, like and subscribe, because I upload a video every single day at 6 p.m. Central Time, most of the time twice a day. This is primarily a space for OU football, but I'm going to talk more about other programs because I love college football, and I believe everybody enjoys college football who is on this channel. Yes, there are going to be videos that are specifically for OU football, and then there are going to be videos like this one. I hope you'll come along. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.